Some other barriers to global trade are tariffs, and then there are a lot of non-tariff barriers. Tariffs are basically taxes on imported goods, and in some countries they're quite high. How did tariffs hurt the business of, let's say, trying to sell t-shirts to Japan? Well, tariffs make goods much more expensive, and then it's harder to compete against domestic products. Protective tariffs to make imports less attractive to buyers is quite common. In the United States, for example, we have tariffs on things like chicken, sugar, steel, and clothes. This is to make it easier for domestic producers who sell chickens and sugar, steel, and clothes. It makes it easier for businesses in the U.S. to sell their goods within the U.S. because obviously if you can buy clothes that have been made in other countries and they're a lot cheaper, that's what you're going to do. In Japan, there are steep tariffs on U.S. tobacco. So right now, the United States has about 2% of the tobacco market in Japan, but most tobacco businesses in the U.S. feel that if there wasn't that steep tariff, that it would easily have over 30% of the tobacco market. If tariffs protect businesses within the United States, then what's the argument against them? Well, lower tariffs foster free competition. This means that the best products at the best prices get to the market. Tariffs stop companies from being innovative and competitive. Italian makers of the Fiat got lazy because there were so many tariffs on foreign cars that everyone basically had to buy a Fiat that if they were going to buy an affordable vehicle. So the Fiat became a pretty undependable, not very nice car. But when trade barriers dropped, so did Fiat sales. What's the argument for tariffs? Well, it protects the domestic companies and local jobs. The United States pays higher wages, and it's hard for us to compete head-on against countries like Mexico who have lower wage rates. Also, those businesses that help the military in wartime should be helped in peacetime to prevent them from going under. Just think about companies who make things like gunpowder or ships, military ships, or companies that make uniforms. When we're not at war, these companies don't exactly make a lot of money, and so the government helps them along. Listed here are non-tariff barriers that most countries use, and this is to limit the amount of foreign products that end up being sold in a country. Import quotas. Why do countries use them? Because it limits specific kinds of goods that can be sold within a country. For example, Japanese motorcycles could sell for a lot less within the U.S. than Harley Davidsons, but several years ago the United States government implemented import quotas on Japanese motorcycles to protect Harley Davidson, because if the fear was that if Japan could saturate our motorcycle market with bikes that were very cheap, they would put Harley Davidson out of business, and the government didn't want to see, a U.S. motorcycle maker going under. The Trade and Development Act of 2000 gives sub-Saharan and Caribbean nations quota-free access for clothes made for U.S. companies. So what's the effect of this? The incentive is for U.S. companies to establish plants there. Embargoes refers to a complete ban of products, and this is usually for political reasons. For example, we have an embargo against Cuba and have for numerous years. That means that you can't go and buy Cuban cigars. We have an embargo against Cuba. This also means that the United States doesn't sell high-tech products to high-threat nations. U.S. companies can't sell arms or high-tech items that could be used for, let's say, nuclear missiles to places like Iraq or Afghanistan. This does cost billions of dollars to U.S. companies, but it also keeps foreign militaries weak. Some countries also have what's called binational regulations. For example, only United States steel can be used to build U.S. highways. Customs regulations are also used by countries in really subtle ways to keep out foreign goods. For example, one of the things that France does to keep out VCRs or DVD players made in the United States or Japan, they make it so all these VCRs or DVD players have to pass through an understaffed customs station that's located in the middle of nowhere, and it takes forever for these VCRs and DVD players to make it through customs, that they take forever to make it to the shelves and the customer. Exchange controls require that money made from foreign countries be exchanged for domestic currency at a control agency. For example, let's say Dell Computers sells 5 million francs worth of computers to France. The U.S. government might require Dell to sell that money to an American bank for U.S. dollars. Why? Well, it's because that money has a better chance of being spent in the United States. Anti-dumping laws prevent countries from selling goods in foreign markets cheaper than they would in their home market. For example, Japan used to sell steel for below cost, and they were able to do this because the Japanese government subsidized them. This used to help companies try to export and get rid of their surplus goods, and of course they could beat out any other competition. Can you tell me why there are no United States television makers? Well, because in the 60s and 70s, Japan sold TVs to the U.S. for below cost to drive United States TV companies out of business. For years, the Treasury Department did nothing, so the anti-dumping enforcement was turned over to the Commerce Department to prevent this.